Precisely 7 words were all it required for Ilhan Omar to commit the gravest error of her entire political career. She suggested that perhaps the senator ought to take it upon himself to become better educated. Those 7 words were delivered with such casual disdain and reflexive arrogance that she remained oblivious to the trap. She never noticed the lion she was provoking or realized that the folksy Southern lawyer with reading glasses was ready to strike. He was about to dismantle her career piece by documented piece. But let me first set the scene for you. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was absolutely packed that morning, with C-SPAN cameras rolling on the action. The topic was technically dry regarding foreign influence and congressional ethics, so most expected the usual Washington theater. People anticipated senators pontificating while witnesses dodged questions, resulting in another uneventful Tuesday in the swamp. However, Ilhan Omar had been called to testify as a witness regarding foreign contacts and campaign finance irregularities. Where Omar goes, controversy follows, so reporters lined the walls while her squad members sat in the gallery for support. Conservative activists filled the opposing side with their phones ready to capture every single moment of the exchange. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat quietly at the far end of the committee bench with bifocals perched on his nose. He was organizing an absolutely massive accordion file with papers everywhere and tabs sticking out in a chaotic fashion. The man had clearly done his homework, yet he looked like every disheveled Southern lawyer you have ever seen. His suit was rumpled, and his tie sat slightly askew, accompanied by that thick Louisiana drawl that is easy to underestimate. The chairman called the hearing to order and made some opening remarks about the importance of ethics in Congress. He spoke about the need for transparency and the right of the American people to know the truth. Then he turned the floor over to Kennedy for his opening remarks, and the senator started gathering his papers. That was the moment Omar made her fatal mistake by interrupting him with a voice dripping with contempt. She addressed the chairman to suggest they avoid wasting time with simplistic talking points and folksy performances. She remarked that perhaps the senator from Louisiana should educate himself on the complexities of global politics and modern immigration. She suggested he stop relying on his usual dog and pony show because some people in the room actually understood nuance. The room went dead silent as Kennedy stopped mid-reach and slowly looked up from his stacks of papers. He removed his reading glasses with exaggerated care and set them down on the desk in front of him. He smiled the kind of smile that anyone who has seen John Kennedy cross-examine a hostile witness recognizes instantly. It was the smile of a predator that just realized the prey had walked directly into the kill zone. He let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, then 10, and finally 15, while Omar shifted uncomfortably. The chairman looked confused about whether to intervene while the cameras caught every second of the tension. Finally, Kennedy spoke with a voice that was still friendly and dripping with that thick Louisiana molasses. He told the congresswoman that he appreciated her sharing an assessment of his intellect before he had even said a word. He noted that it was mighty efficient of her to save time and very considerate of her to do so. He paused as the smile grew and mentioned that he received his law degree from the University of Virginia. He added that he graduated with honors before going to Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship to study under legal masters. He returned to practice law for 20 years, winning some cases and losing a few while learning about evidence. He paused again to look directly at her and asked where she had obtained her law degree. The silence was deafening because everyone in the room knew the answer to that particular question. Kennedy continued with a voice as sweet as honey, noting that she did not actually have a law degree. He pointed out that she held a bachelor's degree in political science from North Dakota State University. He was sure it was a fine school, but confessed he was having trouble understanding the power dynamic. He wondered why someone with a bachelor's degree was lecturing a Rhodes Scholar about education and nuance. He asked her to explain it slowly, using small words, so his simple Southern mind could follow along. Scattered laughter erupted from the conservative side of the gallery, while Omar's face began turning red. Kennedy leaned back in his chair, appearing utterly relaxed, and admitted she was absolutely right about one thing. He claimed to be simple enough to believe that investigations into foreign influence should focus on facts and evidence. He patted the accordion file, which made a satisfying thump, and declared he had a mess of facts right there. He listed documentation, evidence, bank records, tax filings, immigration documents, and marriage certificates as part of his file. He also mentioned campaign finance reports and translations of speeches she gave in Somali, thinking Americans would not translate them. His smile disappeared, and something much colder replaced it, as he reckoned they would find out how educated she was. They were going to discover if her nuanced understanding of global complexity extended to understanding basic American laws. He listed campaign finance statutes, tax fraud, immigration fraud, and ethics violations as the topics for the day. He leaned forward with his eyes locked on hers and noted that she had just insulted him publicly on television. She had called him ignorant and uneducated because she thought he was just some dumb Southern hick. She did it because she believed people like him were easy targets for people like her. She did it because in her world the right accent and degrees matter more than the truth. He picked up his glasses and put them back on before opening the heavy accordion file. He offered to educate the Congresswoman and show her what this simple Southern boy had learned over the years. He warned that when they were done, she was going to wish she had kept her mouth shut. The chairman tried to intervene, but Kennedy refused to yield the floor, while never taking his eyes off Omar. He stated that the Congresswoman had set the tone and expressed a desire to talk about education. She wanted to discuss nuance, so he promised to show her some nuance regarding these complex issues. He pulled out the first document and proposed starting with something real simple for a Louisiana hick to understand. He wanted to talk about money, and that was the moment the masterclass truly began. Kennedy's folksy demeanor was back, but now it had a razor-sharp edge like a cat playing with a mouse. He asked her to help him understand something that had been puzzling him about payment for work. Down in Louisiana, when they pay someone for work, they generally expect them to actually do that work. He asked if they had different rules in Minnesota regarding deliverables and results for money spent. Omar tried to respond, but Kennedy held up a finger and promised he was getting to a question. He claimed he was looking at her campaign finance reports, which are public records available to anyone. He noted something mighty interesting and pulled out a thick stack of papers to hold them up. He mentioned her current husband, Tim Minot, who runs a consulting firm called the E Street Group. He stated that according to the filings, her campaign had paid the E Street Group exactly $2,876,000. He let that massive number hang in the air, noting that it was a lot of money for consulting. That sum was more money than most Americans will make in their entire lifetime of work. He asked his staff to find out exactly what Mr. Minette and his firm consulted on for that price. He wanted to know what services were provided and what work product was delivered for almost $3 million. Kennedy pulled out another document and admitted it was hard to say because the filings were very vague. The categories listed consulting services, digital services, travel expenses, and fundraising consulting in general terms. They dug deeper and found that in just 6 months during 2020, the firm received $1.2 million. That averaged out to $200,000 a month, and he looked at her with pure innocent curiosity. He asked her to explain that because he was having trouble with the math regarding her staff. Her entire campaign staff combined salary was less than what she paid her husband's firm alone. Her husband's company made more from her campaign than 15 actual employees put together. Omar started to speak about comprehensive services, but Kennedy interrupted to say he read the filings. He called them comprehensively vague and offered to add some context to explain the comprehensiveness. He pulled out a timeline showing she married Tim Minot in March 2020 while they both had previous spouses. He noted that the timeline of payments to the E Street Group and the start of the relationship was interesting. Kennedy put on his glasses and studied the timeline with exaggerated concentration regarding the dates. The first payment to the group was in April 2018, when Mr. Minot was still married to someone else. Interestingly, Mr. Minot's ex-wife filed for divorce in August 2019, citing an affair specifically with Omar. She literally named the congresswoman in the divorce filing as the other woman involved in the marriage breakdown. He looked up with all innocence to ensure his simple mind understood the sequence of events correctly. She hired her future husband's consulting firm and then started an affair with him while both were married. Then they both got divorced and married each other while she kept paying his firm hundreds of thousands. Kennedy leaned back and sarcastically noted he was no expert, despite serving on the committee for 12 years. He stated that it looked like what they call personal use of campaign funds, which is illegal. You cannot use campaign money to enrich your family or pay your husband's firm nearly $3 million. He pulled out another document to show that while the firm got rich, she was living mighty well herself. She lived in a luxury apartment in D.C., costing $3,800 a month, and spent $512,000 on private travel. She took first-class flights when Coach would do and stayed in five-star hotels when a Holiday Inn would work. Kennedy started reading from specific expense reports with a voice dripping in sarcasm regarding the costs. He highlighted a travel consulting expense of $47,000 for a single trip to California to speak at a fundraiser. He noted that when he flew Coach to California, it cost about $380, but her husband's firm booked differently. He flipped through more pages to find a digital strategy consultation for $89,000 for 3 months of work. He asked what digital strategy costs that much and wondered if he personally redesigned Facebook. The conservative side of the gallery was eating this up, while even some Democrats looked uncomfortable. Kennedy continued to his favorite part regarding the investigation by the House Ethics Committee and her own colleagues. They investigated her campaign finance and found that she may have violated House rules regarding personal use. He noted the diplomatic language but emphasized that they were clear she paid her husband way too much. He asked what the consequence was for possibly violating House rules and federal campaign finance law. Kennedy looked around the room theatrically and revealed she paid a fine of just $369. She made $2.8 million in questionable payments and settled the ethics complaint for what amounts to a parking ticket. He closed that section of the file with a definitive thump and summarized his understanding of the situation. She turned her campaign into a family business and paid her husband's firm millions in donor funds. She lived a luxury lifestyle on campaign expenses and paid a token fine when she got caught. That fine was 0.1% of the amount in question regarding the payments. Kennedy leaned forward with his voice hardening and said they have several words for that down in Louisiana. He stated she treated her campaign like an ATM machine to enrich her family while preaching economic justice. She lived like the rich while attacking the wealthy and looking down her nose at people like him. He paused to let it sink in and asked how she could lecture him about education and nuance. The only complex thing was the mental gymnastics she performed to justify her corruption. Omar tried to respond with a shaking voice, calling it a witch hunt, but Kennedy interrupted immediately. He stated this was based on the House Ethics Committee report and public records she filed herself. He smiled that dangerous smile again and warned that if she thought this was a witch hunt, she should wait. They had not even gotten to the marriage fraud yet, and he promised that was where things got interesting. He pulled out another thick section from the accordion file and addressed the audience watching at home. If they were tired of politicians who treat campaigns like personal piggy banks, they needed to hear what came next. Kennedy organized his papers with deliberate slowness, while Omar looked like she wanted to bolt from the room. Her squad supporters in the gallery were silent now as their earlier confidence evaporated completely. Kennedy began with a deceptively gentle voice, saying he wanted to talk about her marriages. He knew she did not like when people brought this up and often called it Islamophobic or racist. He stated that he did not care who she worshipped because what he cared about was the truth. He pulled out a large timeline chart and had it displayed on the screen to track her husbands. He admitted having a hard time keeping track, so he made a chart for his simple Southern brain. He pointed to the first entry in 2002 when she married Ahmed Hirsi in a religious ceremony. They had 2 children and a beautiful family, but she never legally married him with a license. Kennedy moved his finger along the timeline to 2008 when she and Hirsi announced a divorce. He noted the confusion of divorcing someone you were never legally married to in the first place. Then, in 2009, she legally married a man named Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi and filed the paperwork. This was where things got interesting, because according to a lot of evidence, Elmi is her brother. The room erupted in murmurs, so Kennedy waited for silence before addressing her denials of the claim. He noted she called it a conspiracy theory, but never actually provided evidence that he is not her brother. She never explained why she married him or addressed the actual evidence that exists in the public record. He pulled out documents displaying birth records from Somalia that show they share the same father. Multiple sources in the Somali community in Minneapolis confirmed they are siblings, and he showed photos of them together. School records placed them in the same household, and immigration documents listed Elmi as her father's son. Kennedy admitted that records from a war-torn country could be sketchy, or perhaps it was a massive coincidence. He asked a simple question. If Elmi is not her brother, then who is he, and why did she marry him? Omar stared straight ahead, refusing to answer, as Kennedy continued with what was known for sure. During the time she was legally married to Elmi, she was living with her first husband, Hirsi. She filed joint tax returns with Hirsi while legally married to Elmi, which is tax fraud. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board investigation confirmed she filed joint returns with one man while married to another. She paid back taxes and penalties because those are facts. Yet she still hasn't explained why. The only explanation that fits the evidence is immigration fraud, so her brother could get status. The timeline fits perfectly because she married him, he got his status, and then she divorced him. Conveniently, she divorced him right before she ran for Congress, and immigration fraud carries a 5-year sentence. Omar finally spoke defensively, calling them disgusting lies, but Kennedy's voice cracked like a whip, demanding answers. He asked why she filed joint taxes with a different man and why photos of them disappeared. He leaned forward, noting she never answers but only attacks the people asking by calling them racists. She hides behind identity politics, hoping people are too afraid of being called names to keep asking questions. Kennedy pulled out his final document for this section and declared he was not afraid of her labels. He asserted that she either committed immigration fraud with her brother or with someone else for benefits. She either did it knowingly as a criminal or was too incompetent to know tax laws. He closed the file section, stating that either way, she had a problem that attacking him would not solve. Calling him simple-minded or crying Islamophobia would not change the facts or make the evidence disappear. He looked at her with a voice dropping to something almost sad about the tragedy of her dishonesty. He gathered his papers and recalled her calling him uneducated earlier in the hearing. He claimed to be educated enough to know that silence usually means the answers would destroy the witness. He was educated enough to recognize tax fraud and understand that marriage fraud is a serious crime. He smiled without humor, asking how that was for education, and warned they were just getting started. If she thought her marriages were complicated, she should wait until they talked about the truth regarding September 11th. The room went dead silent because everyone knew what was coming next regarding the terrorist attacks. Kennedy's entire demeanor changed as the folksy charm vanished to be replaced by genuine anger. He began quietly, stating he wanted to talk about September 11th, 2001, and the memories of that day. Most Americans remember exactly where they were, what they were doing, and who they called. He was in Baton Rouge watching people jump from 90 stories up rather than burn to death. He recalled watching the bravest people in America run into those buildings while everyone else ran out. He pulled out a transcript of a speech she gave to the Council on American-Islamic Relations on March 23, 2019. He asked if she wanted him to read it or if she remembered what she said to the audience. Kennedy read from the transcript where she said KR was founded because some people did something. He looked up and repeated the phrase "some people did something" as if it were a minor fender bender. His voice rose with each repetition, noting that 19 terrorists hijacked 4 planes and turned them into weapons. They murdered 2,977 Americans intentionally and deliberately as an act of war, not an accident. Kennedy pulled out photos large enough for the cameras to capture and held them up one by one. He showed Captain Patrick Brown of the FDNY, who ran into the South Tower and never came home. He showed Wells Crowther, the man in the red bandana who saved dozens of lives before dying. He showed Todd Beamer of Flight 93, whose last words were, "Let's roll," before fighting back against hijackers. Kennedy's voice cracked, saying he could show nearly 3,000 photos of families destroyed by Islamic terrorists. He set the photos down carefully and accused her of reducing their murders to "some people did something." When Americans were outraged, she doubled down and claimed people were twisting her words out of context. Kennedy held up the full speech and declared the context did not help because she was dismissive. He argued it was a pattern of minimizing terrorism and pulled out a voting record to prove it. She voted against a resolution recognizing the Armenian genocide because Turkey did not like it. She opposed designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization despite its involvement in violence. She consistently voted against measures to strengthen security and against funding for counterterrorism. Every time there is a vote between security and her ideology, she chooses ideology over American safety. He pulled out more documents with hands shaking slightly with anger regarding her comments on Israel. She compared a democratic ally to a terrorist organization that uses children as human shields. She said they were morally equivalent and could not bring herself to clearly condemn Islamic terrorism. Kennedy stood up and walked toward her position to make something very clear about his intent. He stated this had nothing to do with Islam or her religion, as he knew patriotic Muslim Americans. This was about her words, her votes, and her pattern of minimizing American tragedies to defend enemies. He told her he thought she never really thought of herself as American, despite the country welcoming her. He pulled out a translation of a speech she gave in Somali to a Somali-American audience in 2019. She told them they are Somali and Muslim first, explicitly placing those identities before being American. He reminded her that she took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Kennedy asked her directly if she could say that Islamic terrorists murdered 2,977 Americans on September 11th. He asked if she could condemn it clearly without minimizing, hedging, or pivoting to claims of Islamophobia. Omar stared straight ahead, refusing to answer, and Kennedy said softly that she could not bring herself to say it. In her worldview, America is always the oppressor, and terrorism is just a reaction to that oppression. He gathered his papers, stating that every American who lost someone on 9/11 deserves better than this. He looked into the C-SPAN camera and asked viewers to share this if they remembered where they were. He turned back to Omar and admitted that maybe he was simple-minded because he simply remembers. He simply expects members of Congress to love America and cannot understand her moral authority to lecture anyone. The silence in the room was absolute, as the weight of the names of the dead hung in the air. Kennedy said quietly that they were not done because they needed to talk about her anti-Semitism. Kennedy pulled out a new section of documents with an expression somewhere between anger and disgust. He wanted to talk about her comments regarding Jews, Israel, and Jewish influence in politics. He displayed a tweet from 2019 where she claimed support for Israel was all about the Benjamins. He called it a classic anti-Semitic trope, implying Jewish money controls American politics rather than shared values. When she was called out by her own party, she apologized, but then immediately did it again. He showed another tweet about allegiance to a foreign country, invoking the dual loyalty trope against Jews. The House of Representatives had to pass a resolution condemning anti-Semitism because her behavior was so blatant. She compared Israel to Hamas and called it an apartheid state, while saying Israel hypnotizes the world. Kennedy noted this was like something out of the protocols of the Elders of Zion regarding Jewish power. He walked to the center of the room, noting she consistently used anti-Semitic language and tropes. He pointed out she never uses that language about China's genocide or Iran's oppression of women. She saves her special language for the Jewish state, the only democracy in the Middle East. He pulled out hate crime statistics showing anti-Semitic incidents had increased 61% since she took office. He held up photos of vandalized synagogues and argued that normalizing bigoted tropes emboldens people to violence. She supports BDS to economically strangle an ally while staying silent on real human rights abuses. Kennedy accused her of hiding behind her identity to attack another minority group that faces discrimination. He pulled out letters from Jewish constituents who were scared watching anti-Semitism rise in their communities. One letter was from the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor who recognized the language she was using. Kennedy looked up with tears in his eyes, stating that her words make survivors question their safety. He said she demands sensitivity for her religion, but extends no courtesy to Jews while trafficking in hate. He walked right up to her position and told her he thinks she hates Israel because it is Jewish. He believed she wraps her hatred in political language, but it is the same old bigotry. He noted that her party protects her, and the media makes excuses, but the American people see it. He looked into the camera, asking those who stand against anti-Semitism to share the video because hatred is hatred. Omar sat frozen, unable to respond, as the evidence of her own words overwhelmed the room. Kennedy gathered his papers and said the hypocrisy was what made it all even worse. While attacking America, she claimed to be a champion of the oppressed and a voice for the voiceless. He pulled out a new folder to examine what her Somali first statement really meant in practice. He queued up a video of her speaking in Somali and read from the professional translation provided. She told the audience they are organized and that the state government is ours to command. Kennedy acknowledged ethnic pride is normal, but wanted to look at her actions through that specific lens. She consistently voted against measures that would restrict immigration from Somalia or enhance security vetting. She opposed designating al-Shabaab as a high-priority threat and advocated for increased foreign aid to Somalia. She pushed for preferential treatment for Somali refugees and fought against corruption investigations in aid programs. Every single policy position she takes regarding Somalia benefits that country regardless of the impact on America. Meanwhile, a chart on the screen showed she voted against defense funding and veteran benefits for Americans. When there is a choice between American strength and weakness, she consistently chooses weakness. When there is a choice between supporting allies and undermining them, she undermines them every time. Kennedy stated it is almost like she is representing Somalia in Congress instead of Minnesota. He pulled out travel records showing visits to Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan, funded by outside groups. She visits countries hostile or ambivalent to American interests while avoiding allies like Israel or Taiwan. He pointed out that in her speech, she referred to the Somali government as our government. Yet she constantly criticizes the American government, calling it racist and oppressive in her rhetoric. He held up the Constitution and reminded her of the oath she took to bear true faith. He asked her directly where her allegiance lies, with America or with Somalia, but she refused to answer. Kennedy spoke about immigrants from Vietnam and Louisiana, who are proud Americans and grateful for the opportunity. He read a letter from a Somali-American soldier named Sergeant Ahmed Hassan, who served in Afghanistan. The soldier wrote that Omar does not speak for him because he is American first. He stated that she embarrasses their community and makes people think refugees are not loyal. Kennedy emphasized that being American is about what you believe, not your race or religion. He told her she cannot serve two masters or pledge allegiance to the United States while serving Somalia. If she cannot put America first, she is in the wrong job and should perhaps run for parliament there. He returned to his seat, saying that loyalty is not nuanced and allegiance is not complex. When you swear an oath to the Constitution, you keep that oath without mental reservation. He looked into the camera one final time, urging viewers to share if they believe in loyalty. Kennedy opened the final section of his accordion file with a demeanor of sadness mixed with righteous anger. He told her she had a chance to be a symbol of the American dream, but wasted it. She went from a refugee camp to the United States Congress, which is a uniquely American miracle. Instead, she used that opportunity to attack the country that saved her and spread hatred against allies. He reviewed the stacks of documents covering fraud, marriage questions, terrorism comments, and anti-Semitism. He stated that this was not one mistake, but a pattern of corruption and anti-American sentiment. What bothered him most was that she fundamentally did not understand what it meant to be American. Being American is about believing in values like freedom and equality, not thinking the country is irredeemable. He read letters from her own constituents who felt betrayed and abandoned by her focus on fame. One letter was from a senior citizen whose calls for help were ignored while Omar was on TV. Another letter came from a Muslim American veteran who felt she misrepresented their love for the country. Kennedy showed a petition with 31,000 signatures from her district calling for her immediate resignation. He told her she was a fraud who sold people on a dream while living a nightmare of corruption. He stated she was done because the truth was out and Americans were tired of the act. They were tired of corruption hiding behind compassion and anti-Semitism wrapped in social justice language. Kennedy walked back to his seat and told her she squandered the American miracle she was given. He admitted he was simple because he simply loves America and honors the victims of 9/11. He refused to sit quietly while someone who hates the country serves in the United States Congress. He closed his accordion file with a snap and mocked her sophistication that led to career-ending scandal. He said he would rather be a simple lawyer who loves his country than a nuanced representative who betrays it. He yielded back his time to the chairman, stating the record spoke for itself regarding the fraud and bigotry. He told Omar that the American people could decide, but they could never say they were not warned. Omar sat frozen in a mixture of rage and humiliation as the hearing came to a close. The chairman asked if she wanted to respond, but she could not find any coherent words to say. She tried to claim it was a partisan attack, but Kennedy cited her own words and filings. She eventually grabbed her papers and walked out without being dismissed, while her supporters scrambled after her. The Kennedy reckoning trended globally within minutes as news outlets covered the dramatic confrontation. The House Ethics Committee announced a formal investigation, and the IRS opened an inquiry into her taxes. A moderate Democrat named Sarah Williams announced a primary challenge and raised millions in donations quickly. Omar's approval rating dropped 41 points, and the shield of identity politics finally shattered completely. 18 months later, Omar was still in Congress, but had lost her influence and committee assignments. She faced a strong challenger who was outraising her 3-1 and leading in the polls. Investigations continued into her marriage and finances, forcing her to move out of her luxury apartment. Kennedy's accordion file became a symbol of accountability, reminding Washington that evidence defeats deflection. It taught a lesson that loving America should be a requirement for serving in its government. The story proved that you should never underestimate a Southern lawyer with an accordion file full of receipts. While others are busy being sophisticated, he is documenting every word and vote for the record. Kennedy reminded America that they do not have to accept corruption and hatred from their representatives. We can demand better and hold them accountable with truth, precision, and 37 pages of receipts. That is not simple-mindedness, that is the power of the American truth spoken clearly.